Now we want to create a topology, and that has to go inside a geodatabase. And so using the catalog, which is accessible through the menu or through a taskbar, we can add data. Now I've already created a geodatabase here. It's a file geodatabase, and I can right-click on that existing file geodatabase and create what's called a featured data set. This is a container to put many layers in and put the topology in. It'll talk about how these layers interact. Now I'm going to name this BML layers, and I have to define a coordinate system. This is the chance I get, and all the layers will have that coordinate system. I don't worry about the vertical coordinate system. I can set an X, Y, and a Z tolerance. Here I'm worried about the XY tolerance. That's the fuzzy tolerance that's described in Chapter 4 of the readings. So it has to do with the quality of the data and moving data around when it gets digitized and created. Now I can add data to my feature data set. These are called feature classes, by importing existing data. So here I'm importing the sublakes layer, a layer we digitized in an earlier exercise, and these data get pulled in then as a layer in one of the feature classes in the feature data set. I can also create new empty containers, in this case a polygon container, for uplands I'll be digitizing later using aerial photos as a background. So right now it contains nothing. I could add attribute holders, variables now if I want, but I don't. And I see the uplands is empty. There's nothing in there because I just added an empty layer. Now we're doing the same here quickly again, right-clicking and adding names for emergent vegetation or for floating vegetation or for a sublakes layer, these sorts of things. I'm adding these empty, again, containers. They're feature classes in the feature data set. And the last thing I want to do is to right-click on the feature data set and add a topology. So this is a new topology I add, which is the rules on how these layers will interact, restrictions on what they can do. Again, I add a cluster tolerance. This is that level of error I'll find acceptable, and I have to say which layers are going to participate, which do I want to govern the interactions on. I can add a rank to those layers so that the most important ones don't move, and I move features to those most important ones. Now I add rules about how these layers interact by describing the features and then the rules applied. So I'll have, for some rules, just one. For others, I'll have two. So here the emergent vegetation and the floating vegetation can't overlap. They can't exist in the same place. I can do the same thing for uplands and lakes. They can't exist in the same place. So those rules are set then by clicking the features and clicking the rules. There's a bunch of different kinds of rules. We describe a few. So I want all the emergent vegetation to occur within the lake. That's a different kind of rule, and it's a restriction on the emergent vegetation. Now sometimes you have concepts that aren't exactly covered by the rules, exactly met by a specified rule. So you might have multiple rules, or in this case, a rule with kind of an accepted error that we describe in the lab. So now you've created your first topology.